बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आप देख रहे हैं प्रोग्राम न्यूज़ फीड। मैं हूं मुर्तज़ा डार। प्रोग्राम में हम बात करेंगे खित्ते की सिक्योरिटी सूरत हाल के हवाले से और ख़ुसूसन अफ़गानिस्तान में बदलती सूरत हाल के हवाले से। अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर तालिबान का कंट्रोल हर गुजरते दिन के साथ बढ़ता चला जा रहा है। बहुत सारे ऐसे वाक़यात हैं जो तालिबान से रिलेट किए जा रहे हैं और बहुत सारे ऐसे ही वाक़यात की तालिबान नफ़ी भी कर रहा है जिसमें वायलेंस प्राइमरली आगे है। बहरहाल आज हम ये भी जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि अफ़गान गवर्नमेंट की जो स्ट्रेटजी है विद इन द अफ़गानिस्तान एंड आउटसाइड अफ़गानिस्तान स्पेशली विद द नेबरिंग कंट्रीज़, वो क्या है। पाकिस्तान इस हवाले से क्या मौक़िफ़ रखता है, अमेरिका इस पर क्या सोच रखता है और मुमकिन तौर पर आने वाले दिनों में वो क्या प्लान किए हुए है। आज हम इसको भी खुरेदने की कोशिश करेंगे और थोड़ी सी ग्राउंड सिचुएशन भी आपके सामने रखेंगे और आपको बताएंगे कि इस वक्त अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर सूरत हाल कंट्रोल किए जाने के हवाले से तालिबान के किस हद तक पहुँच चुकी है। पाकिस्तान के नेशनल सिक्योरिटी एडवाइज़र डॉक्टर मोईद यूसुफ ने फाइनेंशियल टाइम्स को एक इंटरव्यू दिया है जिसमें उन्होंने खुफगी का इजहार किया है अमरीकी इंतज़ामिया पे, रेफरिंग टू द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, जिसमें उनका कहना यह है कि पाकिस्तान के साथ प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स का प्राइम मिनिस्टर इमरान खान के साथ टेलीफोनिक रब्ता ना होना यकीनी तौर पे एक गैर मुनासिब अमल है। पाकिस्तान एक इंतहाई अहम मुल्क है सारे प्रोसेस के अंदर, इस खत्ते के अंदर, और अगर आप इतने अहम मुल्क के साथ रब्ता ही नहीं रखेंगे या उससे बातचीत नहीं करेंगे तो यकीनी तौर पे फिर हमारे पास, उन्होंने कहा कि और ऑप्शंस भी मौजूद हैं। उन ऑप्शंस का उन्होंने जिक्र नहीं किया। हम जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि मुमकिन तौर पर वो ऑप्शंस क्या हो सकती हैं और इसका इस्तेमाल कैसे किया जा सकता है। गुफ्तगू का बाकायदा आगाज़ करते हैं। प्रोग्राम में हमें ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं अंस मलिक, हमारे स्पेशल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट हैं, इस वक्त काबुल के अंदर मौजूद हैं, वहाँ से रिपोर्ट कर रहे हैं। वेलकम टू द शो अंस। सबसे पहले तो अंस आप ये बताइएगा कि इस वक्त सिचुएशन ऑन ग्राउंड है क्या? आप वहाँ पर मौजूद हैं और कवर कर रहे हैं इस सारे इवेंट को। व्हाट इज़ हैपनिंग ऑन द ग्राउंड?
थैंक यू सो मच मुर्तज़ा। सिचुएशन ग्राउंड पे एक तरफ हम देख तालिबान रैपिडली एडवांस कर रहे हैं, काबुल के इर्द गिर्द एडवांस कर रहे हैं, काबुल में एडवांस नहीं कर रहे हैं, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ जो है गवर्नमेंट पुश कर रहे हैं। अमेरिका सपोर्ट जो है उनको काफी मिल रही है। तो अमेरिका ने अपने स्पेशल फोर्सेज जो ग्राउंड फोर्स हैं वो कंदहार भेजे हैं, जो कि एक डिपार्चर उनके स्टांस से है। तो कहीं ना कहीं हमें वो मोबिलिटी, वो फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी भी नजर आ रही है अमरीकी और अलाइड फोर्सेस की कि जी वो अफगान गवर्नमेंट का हाथ साथ नहीं छोड़ना चाहते, उनका हाथ नहीं छोड़ना चाहते। और इसी के देखिए जब प्रेसिडेंट अशरफ गनी के और स्पेशल ऑनवॉय जो है और फॉरेन मिनिस्टर अली खतमर, उन्होंने एक फॉरेन ऑनवॉय की कॉन्फ्रेंस किया 6 मई के प्लान के हवाले से। तो साथ साथ कल रात को हमने एक बड़ी अनयूजुअल चीज़ देखी। यहाँ पर मैं मौजूद हूँ, यहाँ से तकरीबन 4 किलोमीटर मेरे बाएं जाने जो है एक बहुत बड़ा बहुत शदीद धमाका हुआ। काबुल के वक्त के मुताबिक रात 8 बजे इतना शदीद धमाका कि उसकी शॉक वेव तकरीबन 3 किलोमीटर दूर तक सुनी गई। आज सुबह तालिबान ने उसकी बाकायदा जिम्मेदारी कबूल की है। पहला मौका है दोहा डील के बाद 29 फरवरी 2020 को दोहा डील साइन हुई थी। मैं वहाँ मौजूद था दोहा में जब ये डील साइन हुई थी। तो कल रात एक बड़ी अनयूजुअल चीज़ हुई। रात 8 बजे काबुल के वक्त मुताबिक एक बहुत बड़ा धमाका हुआ। मुझसे जहाँ पे मौजूद हूँ यहाँ से मेरे से बाएं जाने तकरीबन 3 से 3.5 किलोमीटर के फासले पर, और उसकी शॉक वेव जो है तकरीबन 3 किलोमीटर की रेडियस में सुनी गई। अफगान तालिबान उस धमाके की जिम्मेदारी कबूल की। वो धमाका अफगान एक्टिंग अफगान डिफेंस मिनिस्टर के घर के बाहर हुआ, बिस्मिल्लाह खान मोहम्मदी के, वो उस घर पे मौजूद थे। साथ साथ 4 हमलावर भी बराबर वाले घर में घुस गए जो कि एक और मेंबर पार्लियामेंट है, उनके घर में घुसे और फिर वहाँ पे 4.5 घंटे की एक बड़ी खूनरेजी हुई, वहाँ पे एक बैटल हुई, सीरियस बैटल हुई, जिसके बाद उनको फिर न्यूट्रलाइज किया गया। ये पहला मौका है 2020 की 29 फरवरी की दोहा डील के बाद जब तालिबान ने कोई मेजर अटैक काबुल शहर के अंदर कबूल किया है। और साथ में उन्होंने ये भी कहा है कि वो अब इस जंग को शहरों की तरफ लेके आ रहे हैं, जो कि एक बड़ा वरीसम साइन है। इसके साथ साथ अगर मैं साउथ की बात करूँ तो कंदहार में तालिबान का काफी गलबा है, कंदहार सिटी को लेके, क्योंकि उनका वो हिस्टोरिकल कैपिटल रहा है। लश्करगाह हेलमंद का जो कैपिटल है वहाँ पर एक बड़ी घमासान की लड़ाई जारी है।
लश्करगाह और हेरात के हवाले से बताइएगा, आपके पास क्या डिटेल्स हैं?
देखिए, हिरात सिटी के अंदर अगर मैं बात करूं तो हिरात सिटी में से 2 डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स के अलावा बाकी तालिबान का गलबा पूरे शहर में मौजूद है। हमारी जो ऑन ग्राउंड पे जो रिपोर्टर थे वहाँ से बात हुई, मुझे पिछले सैटरडे को वहाँ फ्लाई करना था, लेकिन वहाँ पर एयरपोर्ट बंद कर दिया गया था, जिसकी वजह से मैं फ्लाई नहीं कर सका क्योंकि सिर्फ 2 डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऐसे हैं, गुजारा डिस्ट्रिक्ट और कारकुटा डिस्ट्रिक्ट, जो कि एक सिटी सेंटर है और एक जो एयरपोर्ट को हाउस करता है वहाँ पर एक कंटेस्टेड क्लेम रहा है हिरात के अंदर। कल रात हमने देखा कि अमरीकी बमबारी हुई हिरात में, जो कि एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग सिनेरियो है। इसके साथ साथ लश्करगाह में उसको 11 में से 10 डिस्ट्रिक्ट जो है वो कहा जा रहा है कि तालिबान के कंट्रोल में है। तालिबान जो है वो एब्सोल्यूट कंट्रोल चाहते हैं लश्करगाह का। डिस्ट्रिक्ट 1 जो सबसे डिस्ट्रिक्ट है जहाँ पे एनडीएस का हेडक्वार्टर, अफगान आर्मी का हेडक्वार्टर, पुलिस हेडक्वार्टर, गवर्नर हाउस, उसको वो अभी तक ओवररन नहीं कर पाया और वहाँ पर भी बमबारी जारी है। जी
ठीक है, अनस साहब मेरे साथ रह के प्रोग्राम में ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं हमें जो मुस्तफा साहब, वेलकम टू द शो। अनस हमें रिपोर्ट करें, हमारे स्पेशल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट है, इस वक्त काबुल में मौजूद है। माइकल कूगलमैन इज ऑल्सो विद अस। आई वुड लाइक टू take an answer from you, Michael. There's an understanding here, Michael, that US is reluctant in speaking to the Premier of Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan. National Security Advisor has given an interview and it said that if he's not willing to talk to us, then we have more options as well. So before they head to those options, why do you think there is a distance in, or there's a disconnect between two premiers of the most important countries of the region?
Well, it's a fair question, and I think given the messaging coming from the Biden administration about the important role that it sees Pakistan playing in the Afghanistan story, it is a bit of a surprise and I think a disappointment that there has not been this call. But I think that there has been a significant level of engagement, high-level engagement between the two sides. The U.S. Secretary of State and Defense Secretary have been in touch with senior officials in Pakistan. But I think at the end of the day, it says something about the nature of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. It's very transactional, and I think that from the administration's perspective, it would want to have that call between Biden and Prime Minister Khan, but only when there's something significant that's been achieved, or something to announce, or something to talk about, something concrete, and that could entail some type of breakthrough in the intra-Afghan dialogue or something like that. So I think that this administration doesn't want for there to be a call between the two leaders just for the sake of having the call. And this is very different, of course, from what you had with the Trump administration, when President Trump, as you'll recall, had a call with Nawaz Sharif very early on. There wasn't really that much to talk about, and President Trump, he basically said that the Prime Minister was a great guy, and it came off very well, certainly from Pakistan's perspective. But it's a different story with the current administration. I just think that it is not opposed to a call between the two leaders, but it wants to wait until there's a more opportune moment when there's something substantive between the two sides to be discussed or finalized in that call.
Right. Okay. Stay with me. General Mustafa, I'm jumping towards you. The same question that I've asked to Mr. Kugelman, that there is a disconnect between the two premiers, and Pakistan, especially the National Security Advisor, has said that we would execute and look for another option or multiple options. What do you think is the reason, and what are the possible options that Pakistan gonna execute?
To begin with, I think President Biden was conveying a very strong message to Pakistan, and that message is what we must understand. And the message is that you fall in line and you do what I tell you, or what the United States of America wants. If not, then of course this kind of attitude can go anywhere. So that, I think, the message should be very clearly understood, and I think our National Security Advisor should have answered accordingly. But anyway, whatever he said, Pakistan has the options now, as opposed to what was the situation way back in the beginning of the century and the last decade of the last century. Pakistan now has options, and options are very clear now. And the options are that this region now is east to east. This east to east approach that Pakistan and the other countries of this region are barring, let's say, India. Rest of the countries seem to understand this major change, major shift in the geoeconomics, so to say, or let's say geostrategy, or whatever you might like to call it. That is something that you understood. The balance of power is gradually shifting away from where it used to be, and the focus is now somewhere else. So that is something that Pakistan understands, and that is how I think Pakistan's policies are coming out. When we may not have said so openly, other than Prime Minister, because Prime Minister was very categorical that our relationship with China, not at any other cost. So that's, I think, very, very clear. Pakistan is very clear.
So is there any other option than the China, or you think there are some other countries on which Pakistan can focus or should focus apart from China?
Someone must understand. In international politics, there is no this approach, zero-sum game is not played. Pakistan had been doing that, but now I think Pakistan is grown beyond that. We don't want to spoil a relationship with the United States of America. Of course, that's a superpower. Maybe on the van, all right, but it's still a superpower. And it's everybody's neighbor. We don't want to spoil the relationship with the United States of America. But at the same time, where do we find our interests best served? That is what Pakistan has to understand. Our interests are best served by helping or reaching out or accommodating those countries which are in the region, which have an interest in and around Pakistan, in Afghanistan, let's say, and who are not too divergent on other issues. So therefore, I think Pakistan has Iran close by, Pakistan has Russia, Pakistan has China, Turkey isn't too averse to what Pakistan is saying. We have Malaysia almost talking the same language that Pakistan is talking. We don't have any differences with them on that account. And there are other countries like Indonesia that Pakistan reach out to. And those smaller countries about which Pakistan rarely talks, who when they sit in the UN, they have a vote each. Although it may not matter, but the fact is that if out of 200 odd nations sitting in UN, if majority of them vote on what Pakistan are, the Pakistan-sponsored resolution, that will count for something.
Right. So, Michael, how do you see the situation unfolding in Afghanistan, especially the control of Taliban? I mean, there are multiple reports like 70%, and some are claiming like 80% of the control in different areas of Afghanistan. What is your take about the situation there on ground?
Well, it's clearly very troubling, and I think the most immediate concern is the humanitarian crisis. What we've seen over the course of this year, even before these most recent Taliban offensives picked up in the spring, is displacement. Several 100,000 Afghans have been internally displaced this year, and the toll on civilians is really quite heartbreaking. The UN has been estimating that several dozen civilians were killed in Lashkar-Gah in a 24-hour period alone earlier this week. So I think that that's the immediate concern, and we have to hope that the international community, and especially the UN and the UN Refugee Agency, will be in a position to assist, because that's the immediate concern. Beyond that, certainly the fact that the Taliban is now moving into major cities is very concerning. That marks
Right, there's some disconnection on your side. I'll get back to you. Let me just hop across to Mr. Ans. They're reporting from the ground. Ans, last question to you. Help us understand what is the situation on ground related to the peace initiative, that peace conference that Pakistan has taken, and there were some concerns prevalent there in the Afghan government side. Can you help us understand what were those concerns from the Afghan government side related to the peace conference or the Afghan conference Pakistan wanted to initiate here in Islam?
Sure. Do you want to?
Ans, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you want me to?
In English, you can continue.
Okay. So I spoke to Umar outside the Afghan president on Pakistan. That the Pakistani government did not take the Afghan government for the loop. He's claimed that in the loop with regards to the Afghanistan peace conference, he's claimed that this had a secondary plan to have issues ironed out, to have spoken to with regards to the Pakistan government unilaterally. This is what he has claimed. The Pakistani government unilaterally did this initiative, and that was coinciding with the Doha conference as well. Now, this is a claim, but diplomatic sources both in Islamabad and in Kabul say that Pakistan is offended by the diplomatic tirade, by the continuous tirade of Afghan politicians, by a section of Afghan politicians criticize that's a troika that contains that has the first VP Abdullah Saleh, the NSA Hamdullah Mohib, and the likes of them. That includes the National Security Council as well. Pakistan is offended
Right. Thank you so much. We had Mr.
The
Ans
reason,
Malik
but,
joining us from
Ajaz
Kabul.
Khan-
Thank you for your time. Ans, गुफ्तगू को मजीद आगे बढ़ाएंगे. प्रोग्राम में वक्त हुआ चाहता है एक ब्रेक का. ब्रेक की जाने पड़ेंगे. Welcome back after that break. गुफ्तगू को मजीद आगे बढ़ाएंगे. Back to you, General Mustafa. General Mustafa, there's a big disconnect between the Pakistan government and the Afghan government. And there's also an understanding that if the gap, would increase or it widens, the situation would definitely deteriorate. What is your comment on the relations between two governments?
Currently, Pakistan has done its very best to accommodate what goes by, as of now, Afghan government. And there particularly we're talking about President Ashraf Ghani, Amr Saleh, Vice President Mohib, and President Ghani's wife. I mean, these four people, basically, they're the ones who have kind of be in their bonnet. On ground situation demands, and what has happened so far also dictates. Let's say number one, Doha Agreement. Notwithstanding its wording and other thing, the fact of the matter is that the United States of America, who had been occupying this country for the last over 2 decades, they tried to bomb it into submission. They couldn't. Ultimately sat down with their nemesis and Taliban and hammered out a political solution as also a military solution. If you look at it, the wording.
Correct.
Ultimately, they want Taliban to guarantee that this Afghanistan soil will not be used against any other country, and particularly the Western country, the NATO allies.
Yes.
If that be the case, then Ashraf Ghani has a genuine grudge. It was not done by Pakistan. It was done by people who brought him into power, United States of America. They didn't let Ashraf Ghani sit on the table so that he could be part of those discussions. Taking from there on, you see, Taliban as a political and military force are being acknowledged almost on the daily basis. You have them visiting Iran, having dialogue with them, Russia, dialogue with them. Recently, Chinese foreign minister met them for the very first time. And as I read some reports, about 4 days back, there was a German delegation there. There's an EU delegation which has met their Foreign Affairs Committee, Taliban's Foreign Affairs Committee led by Mr. Haqqani. And there was, I think, yesterday. So if you look at this, the picture that is emerging is Taliban is now a reality. That reality has to be acknowledged by Ashraf Ghani Sahab and his coterie of 3-4 people that I mentioned. And they have to adjust themselves according to that. Taliban are not going to adjust because they are on the high. And Taliban, through their, I may disagree and whatever, may not like them, whatever, they're doing a personal opinion, but they're going about it in such a manner, they have created a situation militarily on ground, leading up to a political dialogue which should be becoming a compulsion for the people who are Ashraf Ghani's political opponents. They may also, they're almost there on the table with Taliban when Abdullah went to meet the Taliban.
Yes, correct.
So when you look at this situation, I find that Ashraf Ghani and his governments, maybe therefore having more time, they are, I think, surplus to the establishment, as they say in military language.
Right, so stay with me, General Mustafa. Mr. Kugelman, stay with me. We have Ms. Sumaira Khan with us, joining us right now. Welcome, Sumaira. Sumaira, there's an understanding here, and we were earlier discussing that Pakistani government, however, there's a denial on the statement that Pakistani government is having good relations with the Afghan Taliban. And there's always a chance that these relations would not get along the way they look right now. How do you analyze the situation, and what is your comment on the relations between Pakistani government and the Taliban, Afghan Taliban?
I think Murtaza, it's crystal clear from the day one. Many a times, I think the series of statements, they started dropping in when we just started this year, 2021, and the first statement was made in January from the higher officers of Foreign Ministry of Pakistan. when they were trying to retaliate some Indian media's propaganda that Taliban are in direct influence of Pakistan and they should be using that influence, whatever they have on Taliban, they should be using it wisely. So I think first statement was from spokesperson of Foreign Ministry, and then we saw a series of statements negating that allegation from Indian media and from Indian high officials from Ministry of External Affairs. So Murtaza, it's a kind of a situation. It's a bizarre situation, I must tell you. On one hand, you are facing allegations. On the other hand, Pakistan's high officials are negating that whatever we have on Taliban, we are using that to bring them to the table of negotiations.
You have been to Afghanistan recently, that I know as a fact. So help us understand. You have met multiple people there. I've seen your interviews. Probably have met with some Afghan Taliban as well. What is your understanding from the ground that what they are looking at within the Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan, especially referring to the Pakistan and situation, relations between both countries?
Murtaza, in these last 2 months, when I was visiting Afghanistan, the situation was totally different. There was a kind of an understanding within the Afghan officials' corridors as well that yes, we are open to every kind of negotiations with Taliban, and there should be a strong and stern intra-Afghan dialogue within the quarters of Afghan, and there should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned process, which has always been sought by the Pakistani authorities and other 5 immediate neighbors of Afghanistan. So whenever we see those developments, when I was in Afghanistan, I met everyone, political figures, parliamentarians, civil society members, a few Taliban officials over there, and few very prominent officials who are sitting in the Arg Palace, in the presidential palace right now, and they were very much satisfied with the efforts that was being rendered by that was rendered by Pakistani authorities in terms of bringing Taliban to the negotiations table, and on the other hand, speaking to every walk of life in Afghanistan, be it political or be it non-political, or it's any warlord kind of fraction in Afghanistan. So there was an understanding. But right now, what I see after this abrupt U.S. withdrawal, I see there is another warmonger situation, which is a warmonger fraction. There is a certain group that is trying to earn from this ongoing conflict in Afghanistan, and this is very unfortunate because in 2 months the situation has gone worse from bitter. And
Right.
I hope you know that in terms of international relation, and specifically when we are speaking about a conflict area, how do we rate these phases when it goes to worse from bitter and goes from bad to worse? So my only concern is masses of Afghanistan.
Yes,
They
of
were
course.
very much looking forward to any kind of political solution in Afghanistan, and
course.
I would once again say that things were good. But this immediate withdrawal
Michael,
of,
getting back to you, Michael, as Sumera is referring to the situation there on ground, I mean, it has been, worse in many years, but whatever is happening on the ground right now has no other match, and everyone is concerned about this. My question to you is, Mr. Michael, that how do you analyze these 2 decades of U.S. there in Afghanistan? I mean, what objectives they have achieved? The world knows that, or whatever was shared with them was that they're there to counter whatever the insurgency is happening from the Afghan ground, and it probably can be a problem for the Western countries, especially for the U.S. So do you think U.S. has achieved all those objectives after these 20 years? And as Sumera has referred the term abrupt withdrawal, how do you take this whole situation happening from U.S. side?
Well, the U.S.'s biggest achievements in this war were made in the very earliest days. Very soon after U.S. forces entered, the al-Qaeda sanctuaries that it was going after were badly degraded. And then the Taliban, which had, of course, been hosting al-Qaeda, was knocked out of power. So those were the 2 basic achievements right there. And I think that in the nearly 20 years that have transpired since those 2 initial achievements were made, I think that U.S. 3 governments have really failed to articulate a convincing strategy for why U.S. forces have continued to stay in Afghanistan. And over the last two administrations, a counterterrorism lens was used as the main optic. President Trump had said that U.S. forces are not there to do nation building; they're there to kill terrorists, and that's what the position that President Biden took as well when he announced his decision to withdraw. I don't sense that there's a strong enough terrorism threat in Afghanistan to U.S. interests and U.S. nationals and the U.S. homeland to warrant American forces staying in the country. And this is why we have these very unfortunate optics of U.S. forces quickly heading for the exits as the Taliban insurgency continues to gain steam and step up violence. The Biden administration did not decide to leave Afghanistan for any reason having to do with the insurgency. It left because of the perceived threat posed by terrorism in Afghanistan to the United States. So I think it was could have withdrawn a number of years ago. But clearly, whenever the U.S. had decided to withdraw, what we've seen play out over the last few months was bound to happen. It was clear that the Taliban would react to a decision by the U.S. to withdraw by stepping up its offensives to put as much pressure on the Afghan government as possible.
Right. So, General Mustafa, like Michael has said, let me just add one more thing. Do you see a civil war going on in Afghanistan in the near future? And if it goes, what will be the implications here in Pakistan?
The civil war per se, I don't think so, is going to be as serious an affair as it was way back in 1996. We are still looking at the Taliban or the freedom fighters or whatever you may call them from those lens with the people who remember that time. These are different people. They have grown over the years, not only in their stature, but also of the way things are happening on ground. And the way, look at the way they've launched a diplomatic and political offensive, going around world capitals, being invited to world capitals. And look at the way they are now talking about an all-inclusive system in Afghanistan. They are not talking of monopolizing the power there. And I remember just about, I think day before yesterday, the spokesperson saying that we have seen the negative effect of when we tried to monopolize power way back in 1996. So if that is the kind of approach these people have, and of course there are local warlords and those who are being sponsored to create instability in Afghanistan, they might have their own grudges to settle with the Taliban. But as I look at it right now, it is, I think, going to be extremely detrimental to their interest, to the way Taliban are looking at the situation. If we are going to have a civil war of the kind that we saw way back in 96, 97, I think it will hurt them more than anybody else. So therefore, Taliban, of all the people, must understand, and they do understand, I think, the way I look at the situation. They do understand the implications of the things getting out of hand, because if that is how the situation turns out, they're the biggest losers. Who gets to handle Afghanistan? And how do they pacify those people who have been with them and who suffered so much over the last 3-4 decades? So I think, all in all, I see things working out, not tomorrow, maybe not even day after. It'll take a bit of time. The way things work out and the way things have worked out in Afghanistan, they will, I think, ultimately, they're already talking to the people, like I said in my previous reply to your question, that they are, I think, more or less, they have worked out some kind of arrangement, understanding with those politically opposed to Ashraf Ghani and his government. And if they're the people who fall with Taliban, and look at the way they were able to reach north of Afghanistan as the first kind of an objective, and they were able to seal those borders. How could they do that without support or without the acquiescence of the local population? So I personally feel that we are probably looking at Taliban from the prison, like me, those who have seen things happening in 96, 97, 99.
Right.
Though that moment and this moment in history are two different times.
Things have changed over the course of many years.
Yes, I think so.
Right, got it.
So.
I've taken your point. Sumaira, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and Afghan Taliban, both are apparently said that they might not have very good relations, but there's an understanding both are one and the same thing. What is your take on this, referring to a recent interview given by TTP's head, Masood, to CNN, in which he has expressed his concern and has showed his objective, and that is to impose Sharia, especially in the areas where they think they have their control. How do you analyze relations between both and things happening in Pakistan, referring to TTP?
I think things have gone a bit How do we analyze it, Murtaza? We know it very well that when TTP emerged in Pakistan, there was no CPEC. There was no multi-billion-dollar project going through Pakistan, and it was not just clamping Pakistan. TTP was trying to clamp down Pakistan in early days, and many of the associates that are right now sitting in Washington and New York and other important cities, those who are trying hard to establish a contact between Afghan Taliban and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, we know it very well that Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan name emerged after the incident of Lal Masjid, and even then it was not that strong. We started hearing things about Tehreek-e-Nifaz-e-Shariat-e-Muhammadi in Swat. When after that, the government of Awami National Party, it emerged as single, you can say that with simple majority in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan after Benazir's assassination. And according to many, the vote bank that went to every majority in every province, that was a sympathy vote in the name of Benazir's assassination. So that's a long debate. But coming back to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Tehreek-e-Nifaz-e-Shariat-e-Muhammadi, Murtaza, we were colleagues at that time at Express News, and we have extensively covered all those military operations.
Yes.
You tell me one thing. Where does lie the deep contact of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Tehreek-e-Nifaz-e-Shariat-e-Muhammadi and Afghan Taliban? And for a matter of fact, if we talk honestly about Haqqani network and other frictions, there is zero contact that is being established by many right now, and I'm very shocked, seeing at that after the Chinese government officials, when they came Pakistan, the investigation team I'm talking about that recently visited Pakistan after Dasu attack, when the Taliban leaders who led this 9-member delegation to Beijing recently, they were told categorically by the Chinese government that in the name of Sharia, if these notorious acts are being carried out in Pakistan, and they are attacking Chinese nationals and Pakistani nationals who are working on this mutual project, they won't be spared. And and according to the sources, the things were strictly conveyed to the Taliban in that meeting. Even if any regional partner or any key country, neighboring country is found involved in that, they would be dealt with. So you can have that time.
All right. Thank you so much. We had Sumaira Khan with us, journalist, analyst, joining us from Islamabad. Journal Mustafa, defense analyst, joining us, and Michael Kugelman joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for your time. Program का वक्त खत्म हो जाता है. आपसे इंशाल्लाह जल्द ज़रूर मुलाकात होगी. अपना ख्याल रखिएगा. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़.